Well, welcome everyone. I think I know most of you, although not all of you. There's a few of you whose names just seem vaguely familiar. For those of you who don't know, my name is Marsha Olson. I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Community Engagement and Learning. I just started in this position in January. So I am feeling the franticness of the end of the semester in lots of ways this year. Um, I For those of you who aren't familiar, I also ran the Campus Vote project um, at UAA for it's been about 5 years that I've been running that to increase student voter registration and education and turnout. So I've been pretty deeply invested in community engaged work in the classroom for several years. And I'm really looking forward to today, hopefully helping to support those of you who are interested in starting to incorporate community engaged or service learning work into your classes, and also maybe help to create some connections between you and perhaps some of the faculty we have here today who are have been doing this for a few years. We've got a pretty good mix based on the registration. Uh, just so you all know, all of the players here. So Nicola Pearson Allen is our admin. She's a program coordinator for CCEL. She has a coworker with her today. So she's not going to be on the mic as much, but she'll be in the chat helping answer any questions that you guys have and drawing attention to me. So welcome, Nicola. And we also have Shaunalee Whitney here, who is the director of the Faculty Development and Instructional Design, right? Yeah. Unit. She's here, I think, just for a few minutes to show her support, and then probably scurrying off to like one of the 7 million other meetings that she has. I know a lot of us are in that position today. I appreciate you all being here. Again, I know this time of year is really bonkers, and congratulations on getting your grades in. Travis, I saw you note that in the chat. It has been a year. um, so the way that today is intended to be structured is for this to be an opportunity for you all to have questions answered and hopefully get out of the end of today with some ideas about how you might be able to incorporate community engaged work, potential partnerships, and potentials for grant and financial support when it comes to community engaged work. Uh, I want this to be an opportunity that, like, when you walk away, you feel like you have some new tools or new ideas in your back pocket. So while I know I sent out the outline for you all with the schedule, and we are going to hit those things, I also want this to be an opportunity for you all to collaborate and ask questions. So don't feel like as we're going through some of the slides or as different speakers are speaking, don't feel like you can't ask questions or have comments. I really value many of your experiences with community engaged work, and we want to hear from all of you. Um, I feel like in some ways I'm talking to my students right now, how I'm always like, and I'm sure a lot of you are like this too. I don't want to just have to talk the whole time because we all might be a little bit bored if that happens. I want it to be a collaborative process today. We're going to start off with introductions. Just tell us your name, your department, and a little bit about what you're hoping to gain from today. And then we'll move into talking about community engaged work, what it is, what are some examples of it, and kind of the differences between community engaged work and service learning. We have a few faculty members who will be sharing a bit about their projects that they've done. And that'll be an opportunity for folks to ask questions as we're going through that. And then we also have Brittany Howell is going to talk a bit about the Research Fellows program and research that can be done that's community engaged. Then we'll take a break. I have it blocked out as a 90-minute break. I'm going to leave this room open for the first 30 minutes of it, just so that if there's questions or there's collaborations that want to take place, I will be here. I can answer any questions. I can help support you guys in whatever way you need. And then we'll return at 1, and we've got 2 excellent guests to speak this afternoon. We have Hollis Mickey, who's here with us right now, actually already, from the Anchorage Museum, who's going to talk about some of the really cool opportunities there are for partnership with the museum. And then Margot Fleiss from the Center for Economic Development is also going to be joining us to talk about some different opportunities for partnership through the Business Enterprise Institute that she works for under UAA, and some opportunities for funding that might be able to come through that way. Because I know, as we're all aware, it seems like getting funding for these different projects can be a really challenging experience. So we're going to hit on that this afternoon. And then the end of today will be, I have a whole hour set aside, and both of our guest speakers are going to stay. And we're going to have an opportunity to collaborate and for us to pop into breakout rooms if needed or if wanted, and talk about what kind of projects you might be looking toward and what kind of planning you might want to start working on this summer. So that's the plan. Any questions before we get started? Yeah, Shawnalee, go ahead.
I just want to say that in addition to you guys finding out about ways to deepen your practice and develop projects and those kinds of things, I want to mention that if you have ideas, if you have contacts, if you have entities in the community that you are thinking, this might be a good place for an internship placement, or this might be an opportunity for a class project, or those kinds of things, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because I won't go into all the details, but I can give you an example of something that Marcia and I just sort of bumped into the other day through a kind of unusual circuitous path where we ended up being able to identify a possible internship that is something that we could just kind of have in our back pocket in a way. And a lot of times students need to come in and develop their own internships, but this might be something that can be an ongoing opportunity. And so I strongly encourage you to be thinking both about your own classes and your own, students and projects and those kinds of things, but our community in general and our institutional community specifically is just this amazing network of things. And you never know when mentioning item X to person Y results in project Z. So please, please don't hesitate to share information, share ideas that you have. It really helps the center. It really helps the institution. And as things begin to, maybe open up a little bit and so on, I think there are probably going to be new or different opportunities that we maybe had not even considered in the past. So don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. You can talk to Nicola or Marcia or myself, or connect with somebody that's on the council for CCEL, but please just keep those kinds of things in mind. You never know when a little idea will present itself. Okay. So I'm really appreciative of you guys being here, especially this late in the game with your contracts and so forth. And as Marcia said, I congratulate you on completing your grading and so on. And I'll look forward to reviewing the recording, since I won't be able to stay today. But I'm so appreciative of you guys being here, and hope you have a terrific intensive.
Thanks, Shawnalee. Okay, well, let's start then with introductions. So these can be pretty short, 30 seconds to a minute. Just share your name, your department, the types of classes that you teach, and what your goal is for today, what you're planning to get out of it. I will just, in the interest of making this easy, I will just go by the way that people are organized on my screen. I'll call on you. I'm going to put in the chat here what you'll be sharing. So if you're like me and if somebody says something and then it immediately leaves your brain, it's there. We'll start with William. Would you like to go first? I guess we don't need people's names.
Sure. Hello, I'm William Jamison. I'm in the philosophy department. This will be my 26th year. I started in spring of '95, so I don't know how to add all that up. But as far as collaboration with the community, Well, I teach philosophy. My students are part of the community, so that's certainly a collaboration event. But I think and by the way, I remember years ago when I had an art class, it was called the Humanities. We don't have, I guess, an intro to humanities anymore. They're gone, uh, the class title. But I did take a group to the art museum to look at the art there. So I suppose in a sense that's community by being out in it. We did multiple things. We went to Beluga Point. It was during the summer. So we went to Beluga Point when the belugas were coming in, and they were there. It was amazing. The class really enjoyed that. Then we also visited the municipal greenhouse, and my theme for those visits was nature. You know, nature on its own, the beluga, nature confined, the municipal greenhouse, and then nature totally controlled the museum. You know, so that was just, I made that up, and the students enjoyed that. But normally, of course, philosophy, we're just reading Plato, reading Daniel Dennett, you know, so it's the whole history of philosophy. And my goal is to change people's lives by having them become deep thinkers, assuming I know what that is and that I could even lead that sort of thing. But I'm only supposed to have talked for less than this, but I would love to get into what Zoom is doing, because there's been so many different collaborative events that I've participated in. In fact, most of them I end up just having the link sent to me of the recording so that I could go back and see it, because a lot of them are on the East Coast, and who knows what time people live on the East Coast. It's certainly not our time.
Well, we
I'll shut up.
We'll get it. Yeah, we'll get into some of the opportunities that are available for sure. Thanks, William. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kim, you're up next.
Sure. So my name is Kimberly Pace. I am in the political science, and I am proud to say now the Women's and Gender Studies program finally went through official rollout in the fall. Super excited about that. I'm the coordinator for that program. I teach a wide variety of classes in political science and women's studies. I've done, I don't know how many internships and lots of community engaged assignments, and Zoom has actually made it easier because I can say, here's a menu of things that you could participate in and come back and, you know, discuss with the class. And that's been fantastic. And I apologize to Marcia and Shawnee. I got that email about the opportunity for some internships, and I've been in a conference all week on the East Coast time, so I have not responded, but I'm super excited, and I will get back to you either today or tomorrow, or not tomorrow, maybe, I don't know. So I love community engaged work. I run the Model United Nations program. I work with all the high schools in Anchorage and several throughout the state of Alaska. I think that really and truly that's where learning happens. It's not about memorization for me. Unless, you know, it's an anatomy class or something like that, you probably should know, you know, bones and things like that. But I really feel that learning happens when people are engaged in the outcome. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm not entirely sure I signed up for it. I don't exactly know what we're doing. So I'm super excited. It'll be like a big surprise. Yay. Thank you for putting it on. Whatever it is.
Well, welcome. I appreciate you bringing that attitude.
Yeah.
All right, Brittany, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brittany Howell. I'm in the Division of Population Health Sciences. And my goal here today is to talk about the Community Engaged Research Fellows Program and hopefully recruit some new folks for next year's cohort.
Thanks, Brittany. Amber, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amber. I'm in the Department of Communication, and I started at UAA in August of 2019. So I have not done any community engaged components of a class, and I'm particularly interested in learning about, I talked to Marcia a little bit about this earlier in the semester, how you can incorporate some smaller kind of assignments, not necessarily a semester long project, but some smaller assignments that would qualify as this community engaged learning to kind of get my foot in the door, see how it goes, and then think about expanding to a larger type of project.
Thanks, Amber. Sharon?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Shamar, and I'm in the Justice Center. And we're going to talk about what kind of courses we teach. Mostly for me, it's crime prevention and policing courses, although in the past I've taught a class called Crime Against Business. And that turned out to be a really good class for community-based research. One year I had students do a study of rundown motels in Spenard, and working with the Spenard Community Council, and then sometimes in my crime prevention classes, students have gone out and done physical and social observations of very disorderly areas in the city, like 13th and Gamble is one I always use because there's always something exciting going there, at least for students to observe. And so I guess I would want to keep doing these sorts of things in those classes. But so there's two things today that are interesting to me. One is the discussion about how to get funding to do this kind of work, this research that for me has always been an impediment to doing it, as an independent scholar, like not with the students, but in hopes of getting published, like, who funds it. So that'll be very interesting to me. And then also the speaker from the Business Enterprise Institute, because I do think that there's a lot of alignment between criminal justice interests and business interests. And I'm particularly wanting to get my students thinking more and more about careers in fields that are ancillary to the government-run criminal justice system. So like private security, for example, because that's where the jobs and the bucks are for students. You can become quite well off if you're in private security, whereas if you're in a government position, you sort of get capped out at a certain amount. And some students are really drawn to money. And I don't want them to go to law school because they want money. I want them to think about other careers. Okay, so thank you, and I'm looking forward to today.
Thanks. Welcome. Travis, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Travis Hedwig. I'm a faculty member in the Division of Population Health Sciences. Consider myself to be an applied health researcher. I try to weave in elements of community engagement into everything I do. I teach whatever I'm asked to teach, but I'm currently working up a community engaged knife fighting curriculum. If anyone's interested, let's talk. Just kidding. My goal for today is to participate in this community of practice. I am really interested to learn more about Brittany's community engaged faculty fellows program. And I think at this time in particular, we need to find ways to reconnect as faculty. And I see the role of CCEL, not only within our campus community, but our community writ large, how we do the translational work, how we sell value, how we tie service a little bit more explicitly to broader communities of practice. Thanks for organizing this.
Welcome. Amana? Oh, there you are.
All right. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Amana, and I'm a multicultural postdoc in the School of Social Work. Community engagement really cuts through nearly all my classes, and I've taught social work practice classes, and where I try to bring in elements of community service and working with organizations pretty much. So I've really found that the CCL work really helps my teaching, but I also really see my orientation to teaching is mainly being community engaged. As Kimberly said, I really believe that knowledge not only comes from within the four walls or well, we don't talk about walls these days, right? So it'll be like Zoom, but actually, learning also occurs pretty much outside. So I've really been able to do that within my classes as well. As for my expectation here today is to talk about one of the projects that has been supported by CCL, and I will be sharing a little bit about that as around 10:30. Yeah, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Amana. Grace, you're up next.
Okay, so I'm Grace Luberk. I'm in the Allied Health Department. I teach clinical microbiology and molecular biology for upper division students. I had an idea that we were going to do before the pandemic, and I'm hoping to work on that. I also judge for not only the Alaska Science Fair, but the International Science Fairs in microbiology. And I find that the students that are in here are students that are typically have some connection to a university. So in other words, it's very elite to a lot. And I want to be able to show students that you can do research. So we had this idea of research in a box, where we would go to the classrooms, to schools, and kind of brainstorm with how you do a research project, ideas that you can think about, and how to formulate that to kind of kickstart. So it's not just, I hate to say it, the kids whose family members go to a university. I mean, at the international level, so many of those students have, and it doesn't mean that through this that they can't make those connections, but if they don't even know where to start, there's never a process. So that's my plan. And that's my advanced MLS students that actually have a research team that we have in our department. And that's what we were going to do. So I'm hoping starting that again with the idea that we might be able to get back into the classroom. Yeah.
Cool. Very good. Thanks. Welcome. Sarah, go ahead.
Right. Sorry, I will be really quick, and then I actually have to run to our department meeting and training this morning. But I'm Sarah Prelip. I'm in the Department of Writing. Like Amber, I actually came to UAA in 2019. So I've also been sort of struggling, trying to get to know the community a little bit because I haven't been here very long. So that's definitely probably my biggest goal for today. And I'm glad I'll be able to come back this afternoon, is to really start thinking about partnerships and different ways to bring community engagement into my courses. I do have a project right now, and it was Marcia and I think Shauna Lee helped a little bit with that. It was really hard to get that partnership in place. And our project had to change when we were pretty far into it because the partner decided that what we had planned and we're doing wasn't actually going to work after all. So really need to be thinking about how to develop and how to find those partnerships even, because I just don't even really know everything that's out there right now. So thank you, and I apologize, but I've got to head out to the next meeting.
Okay, we'll see you this afternoon. Hollis, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Hollis Mickey, and I am the Chief Learning and Access Officer at the Anchorage Museum, which means I run the education department. So when you want to bring a group to the museum, but I'm hoping that if you are able to join this afternoon, I can talk a lot more about the many other kinds of opportunities that are present. I'm also adjunct faculty at UAA, and I teach art history in the art department. And I guess my goal for today is to engage with all of you and really get to hopefully inspire some of you and be inspired by the work that you are doing.
Thanks. Amanda, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Walsh, and I'm in Dietetics and Nutrition Department, a faculty member. I'm not sure exactly what goals I have for today, especially, I've always appreciated what I learn when I come to the CCEL, different intensives or trainings. I love to hear what other people are doing. I like to see if there's other possible connections that can be made. Within our program, we do have a lot of naturally established community partnerships because we do internships with our graduate students. And so there are some connections that I've made that we've been able to do research or community projects within our courses, but I know there's a lot more opportunities out there. So I think if I had to choose a goal or two for today, it'd be to learn what everyone else is doing and also continue to make connections to see what other possibilities are out there. Thanks.
And Leslie, I know you just joined us. We're just sharing kind of name, department, goal for today.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Leslie. I am in the Dietetics and Nutrition Department. Amanda pretty much said all there is to say as far as my goals and aims for today. I'll just echo what she said. We have a lot of partnerships established already, but I am very curious to hear what others are doing and see if there are opportunities for partnership.
Thanks. And Susan, you're our last one. I know you just joined us. Welcome. We're sharing name, department, goal for today.
Good morning, everyone. I am Susan Muscus, and I teach in the School of Nursing. And my goal for today, well, first of all, it's very exciting to be part of anything that has community in it, even nursing. I love community-based nursing. And so one of my main goals is just to kind of see where other people are bringing the classroom alive by networking and being with others that are teaching and being connected to the community as well. So I'm excited just to kind of hear and listen and see what everyone's doing.
All right. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome everyone again. One of the things that I've always found helpful about attending these intensives in the past is just what several people noted is you start to hear what other folks are doing and you're like, oh, that like there's a piece of that I can bring to my class, or maybe there's a potential for collaboration, or can you connect me to that partner that you have? Oftentimes that's what comes out of these type of intensives. So I hope that that type of thing will also come out of today. I'm going to share now my screen for a few minutes and do just a couple minutes on exactly what the goals of community engaged work typically are, what it is, how it community engaged differs from service learning, just so that we're all on the same page in terms of definitions and terms. Thank you, Shauna Lee. Have a good, oh, she's gone. And then talk briefly about some of the best practices in regard to integrating community engaged work into academic content, best practices with partnerships, some tips for getting started, and I will also cover a bit about what type of support CCEL specifically can provide to you all. And then after that, we'll be jumping into Amana, and Sarah Buckingham will be joining us here in about half an hour to share a bit about their projects and dig in a little bit more into examples of community engaged work that we've done. So that is the plan. As I am talking through this, please feel free to pop any questions or comments in the chat, or if you want to jump on a mic, it's easiest for me if you can use the raise hand function just so that I can see you, because obviously I'm sure we're all familiar with this. When we're sharing screen, you can't see everyone. So I will share my screen here. So we're going to start with kind of what community engaged work is. Several of you already mentioned kind of what what kind of wonderful things have come from your experiences with community engaged work. I have the kind of the definition or the goal of community engaged work here listed from the National Service Learning Clearinghouse. I imagine most of you know, but I'll reemphasize, community engaged or service learning work is also considered a high impact teaching practice. We see time and time again that students who engage in this type of work, who feel more connected to the community, tend to be more engaged and see more success long-term, both at the institution, but also when they leave the institution and move on to professional endeavors. They tend to see more success if they've already gotten some connection to their community. It also allows students application of concepts, and several of you mentioned this idea that learning takes place beyond just the room that we are physically in, beyond just at our institution. I will speak from experience. I taught oral communication general education requirement courses, which is a course that everyone, like not everyone, a lot of students dread because there's public speaking involved, and public speaking is not everyone's favorite topic. And one thing that I found in teaching that course and using community engaged work is they started to see the real, the quote unquote real world application of those concepts, of the necessity of being able to speak clearly and succinctly, and have research easily available to be able to cite clearly out loud, being able to see themselves use that in a more real application beyond just a classroom really transformed my students' approach and view on the value of what they were learning in general ed courses. So this application of the concepts is really valuable. And I would also say beyond that, it helps them as they do move into a more professional world. They have experience utilizing the skills that they're learning in the classroom beyond just taking an exam, writing a paper, delivering a presentation. We also have noticed that community engaged and service learning work opens the door a bit more for students and faculty to engage in research. We have a lot of students, and I'm going to talk more about our student assistants toward the end of today, but it allows students to engage in research opportunities as well. And we know that undergraduate research is considered another high impact teaching practice. And then finally, the connections to community, and this has been mentioned in your introductions as well, but it's worth noting that one, connections to the community for students is really valuable. It helps them long-term. We see increased student success when they have a sense of connection and a sense of place. But this also helps us at the institution, especially right now when we're in this interesting cultural moment of there seemingly being a pretty strong divide in how people engage with the scientific method and with research. This is a particularly valuable time to help bridge that gap. And I would say that our center is really the place that we can do that in a meaningful way. So CCEL serves as this meeting point between the community and the institution, and we really want to help you all connect more. And if we're thinking in terms of where we are as a university right now within our state, we could really benefit from the community understanding the value that we bring and the research that we do and the work that we can do to help better our community in general. So this moves beyond just something that you try in a classroom. This really can transform, I would say, our community, and however you want to define that, right? Our city, our municipality, our state. We really have an opportunity to make that change. So there have been a couple questions about what's the difference between community engaged work versus service learning. So community engaged work, there is some sort of identified public benefit of community engaged work, and there should be a clear link within the class between the community work to the student learning outcomes. And then the final part of this is some element of reflection. And this is one of the primary reasons we see community engaged or service learning work being considered a high impact teaching practice, is this element of reflection back on their experiences and application of what they're learning in class to their experiences. So service learning is, I always think of it as community engaged as like the low level, like not low level in terms of engagement, but like you can do one project that's service learning and that can be it. Or I'm sorry, community engaged. Service learning is like elevated. There's a much more significant element of community-based work that happens. Typically students are going into the community when it comes to service learning or engaging with the community in a much more comprehensive way. Students oftentimes will have some preparation for the service, so you'll be prepping them to go out into the community. There will be more structured reflection that occurs, and there will often also be evaluation of the impact that the students had as a part of their service learning. So community engaged learning is where we see maybe one project or a couple projects which within a class. Service learning is a more comprehensive embedded element within the class. And either of these are great things to incorporate in your class. Some programs lend themselves, or classes lend themselves to community engaged work a little bit more than service learning, or vice versa. If you're just getting started, we typically encourage people to start with a community engaged project, start small, and then you can build from there as you develop better partnerships and develop your classes. In terms of best practices as you're putting together the academic content and trying to align it with the community engaged work, one thing that you want to start thinking about right away are how can you align your learning outcomes for the class with the community engagement goals. So being thoughtful about what is the goal of the community engaged project or work that you're about to introduce, and how does it clearly connect to the learning outcomes. Next is start small. And I think I have this in like 4 different slides today, but really start small. It's okay to start with maybe even just one reflective assignment that writes about the community, or is maybe only a week or 2 within your class. It's okay to start really small and then build from there, because incorporating new things into our curriculum can be challenging. A lot of times there's some trial and error that happens. Starting small is going to lend the most success long term. And then ensuring that you're incorporating some element of reflection. So you notice both in community engaged learning and service learning, reflection is a really important process as a part of this type of learning. So whether it's a journal entry, whether it's a reflection that happens in class orally, whether it's a discussion board that happens online, there should be some element of reflection. We've found that students don't make the connections as well between what they learned in class and what they're doing in their community engaged work if there isn't some element of reflection present. So next comes partnerships. And this is the area that I want to spend a little bit more time on, because I think this is an area that ends up being a bit of a barrier for folks, because it can be a little bit challenging finding and developing partnerships. So some things to keep in mind as you are thinking about who a good partner would be and developing those connections are some keys to good partnerships. So first, the students should be supporting some sort of public good. So there should be some purpose behind any community engaged or service learning work that you do. And I realize that seems like a no-brainer, but sometimes we have people that go, well, I'm gonna go do X or Y. And you're like, well, like, what's the goal though? How is that serving the broader public good? And next is this element of reciprocity. So what we don't want to happen with community engaged work with service learning is we don't want this to be one-sided. This should be a partnership. That's why we call it a partnership. It's not just necessarily the institution going out and doing good. There should be mutual benefit that comes. So students should be getting something out of the project or the endeavor, and the institute or the organization that you're partnering with, or the entity that you're partnering with, should also be getting some value out of it. And it can take some time to develop partnerships that really do incorporate this element of reciprocity, where it's mutually beneficial to all parties involved. it's also particularly important to ensure that the community, organization, or agency or entity that you're partnering with has a voice in the matter. And again, I think sometimes what we'll see happen is people will say, well, I know this organization needs X, so we're going to go help them with that. I would caution people to pause and make sure that you go and actually ask what it is that the partner could use, what would be of value to them. Because what we don't want to happen is for our work to become an additional burden on that organization or entity. Right? We want it to be a collaborative process because that's how we achieve like real connection and real progress. It's also particularly valuable when thinking about partnerships in attempting to connect students to an opportunity to experience more diverse people's ways of thinking, places. The more we can engage students in a more diverse experience, the better off they are. And then finally, when thinking about effective partnerships, really be thoughtful about the element of public dissemination of knowledge. So if the students, for example, or your class is doing research about a particular organization, how is it that that research is then going to be shared to support the public good, to support that organization? So oftentimes you'll see in community engaged or service learning work, there will be some element of public dissemination of the information that was gathered. To give you a quick example of that, I'll use a project that I did in my class around voting. My students, or for the project, my students increased or worked to increase voter registration, education, and outreach among college students at UAA. We partnered with the League of Women Voters of Alaska because the League of Women Voters, one of their primary concerns is voter registration and voter turnout. And one of the things that we did was have the League of Women Voters representatives come in and act as voter registrars so they could register others, or they could register students to vote, while simultaneously the students in the class were collecting some data about student voter attitudes. So like, why aren't they voting, or what are their barriers to voting? And then the class put together a presentation to share with the League of Women Voters of Alaska about why young people are less likely to vote, and things that they learned over the course of the project, which then allowed the League of Women Voters of Alaska to be more thoughtful about their materials that they share in outreach. So it was a mutually beneficial relationship that allowed for some public dissemination of the information. I want to pause here just for a second and see, I know that several people in here have had some experience with partnerships. Could you pop in the chat some of the organizations you've had an opportunity to partner with? And okay, so I'm seeing St. Francis House Food Pantry, Recover Alaska, Rural Cap, Cook Inlet Housing Authority, Alzheimer's Association, Stone Soup Group, Providence, Alaska Center for FASD, okay, Providence Hospice, Food Policy Council, First Congregational Church of Anchorage, CRRC, Spinard Community Council. Sharon is very involved in community councils, I know that. NeighborWorks, great. I'm curious if anyone would be willing to jump on the mic and talk briefly about some of the challenges that you faced in terms of creating partnerships. What are some things that folks might want to be cautious of?
I can try because I have to leave in a minute.
Okay.
I think and maybe it's more of a tip than anything, is that your sort of point of entry is a listening session. And that when approached from sort of a problem-based, I know several of you have said this, students that are wanting to get involved in real world, real problems that are emerging in our community. Where is there a need, and how can we, our class, me as a researcher and a handful of students, or however we position it, would like to make the case that we can meet a need. And I'd love to just have a brainstorming session about how we could collaborate. What are some pressing needs? Every organization that I've run across, there's like oh, if only I had, 5 bodies. Well, I've got 30. Although one thing, I'll shut up after this. One thing I'd like to do, I'm always trying to improve on this stuff, and I haven't done the best job of bringing it into my classes writ large. For me, I always take the handful of students approach, or I'll work something up myself, and then I tend to be a little bit more selective with the students I bring in. And I'm trying to change that about my own approach. I'd like to make it more equitable in terms of all students having these opportunities. So that's like a stretch for myself. A listening session initially helps me.
That is a great technique to utilize, because it is great. It is helpful to go in and say, hey, we have some ideas about ways we might be able to support this organization or entity, but also what is it that you need? Because sometimes the priority for you is not necessarily the priority for them. So that is great insight, Travis. Thank you. And we can talk more about partnerships here kind of toward the end of the session. We have more time for collaboration too. Okay, so getting started with community engaged or service learning work. First and foremost, start small. One assignment is fine. It doesn't have to be this massive endeavor. It can grow from there. I mean, I think Travis's example is a good one, saying first, maybe you're starting with just a handful of students and now trying to branch and make it a more comprehensive project that more students can be involved in. That's totally reasonable once you get the foundation. One thing that a lot of folks start with is providing some options. And I think, Kim, you mentioned this in your introduction, maybe even saying like, hey, here's option 1 for an assignment that isn't necessarily community engaged, right? They don't have to go do something extra or what students define as extra. And this other option is to do something community engaged or service learning. That does allow students that choice. And it removes any of that barrier of like, you're making me do something extra that you might get in terms of pushback, especially in the infancy of your project. Finding the right partner can be a bit of a journey. CCEL is here to help support you guys in that. And I want to make that very clear. While I can't show you a list and say, here, pick any of these people and I can help you, and I can immediately connect you with it, I can work with you all to help find the right partner and help connect you and help facilitate some of those discussions and help with setting expectations, because that's a really important element of getting started with developing a partnership, is being thoughtful about what is realistic for you and your classes, what is realistic for your students, what is realistic for that organization and what they can provide. Being really clear about setting expectations is incredibly important to developing a nice, strong partnership. And next comes out exploring that scope and goal of the work. So what do you want to achieve? What is going to be valuable for the organization? And then finally, considering what your dissemination opportunities are. So in best practices, I mentioned public dissemination of the information is particularly valuable. What is a reasonable dissemination of the information? How might you do that as within the partnership or individually within your classes?
Marcia, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. Just to move back to when you're finding the right partners and sort of the difficulties around this, and I might be jumping the gun a little bit because I know CISAs are coming up, but can you apply for a CISA, like a student, to help you make those connections? Like, is that a way that you could do that, or?
It is. Yeah, so Amber, you segued me perfectly.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. So I'll go out of order on my bullet points. I'll start with community engaged student assistance. So CCL provides a small stipend to students as a tuition award to be community engaged student assistants, or CSAs. It's an excellent program. It seems that this is going to be funding that we will have next year, no problem. And I know a lot of people in here have used CSAs in the past. They are excellent. Yes, you can have them work with you on projects at any stage. So if it is the planning stage, great, you can do that. If you want to bring them in to help you with connecting with a partner and facilitating those discussions, I think that could be a really valuable thing for a student assistant to be engaged in. You can also bring them in to help in the implementation of a project, or to do some of the reflection back on a project or revamping of a project that you might be working on. This is a pretty flexible position for students. Like I said, we have them every year. I really, really encourage folks to apply for them. Hopefully did that answer your question about them?
Oh yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. That was perfect. Exactly what I wanted to hear.
I want to be really clear about what my goal for CCL is, to hopefully make all of your lives, or anyone who engages with us, a little bit easier. There are things that we can do to support you. So the CSAs are one example. Then the other example are our mini grants. These are up to $2,000, and faculty can apply for these, and it provides support for your project. It can support a wide range of things, whether it's materials or a student worker. I think we've had it occasionally pay for things like travel to conferences. It's a pretty flexible mini grant. One thing about the mini grants that I just want to note is that we fund those based on the tuition from our community engaged class, our Introduction to Civic Engagement class, which is a social science GER course. So if you have students who are interested in community engagement, civic engagement, and are looking for their social science GER courses, that would be a great one to recommend to them. It's a great class. I would not advocate for the class if I didn't think it was a good one, but it also helps us in funding that mini grant program. And Brittany mentioned that, yes, mini grants don't support faculty salary, but they can support, my understanding, to the best of my knowledge, is that they can support things like conferences. I think it might be able to cover things like travel to conferences. It certainly can cover conference fees. So we can be pretty flexible with the mini grant funding. We also can help you with project design support. So if you are sitting through today and you're going, oh my gosh, I know I want to do this, but I have no idea how exactly I'm going to incorporate a project in my class. We're here and available to sit down and talk through. I have lots of examples of different syllabi and different projects from a wide range of disciplines that I'm happy to sit down and talk through with you and help you in constructing a project that seems realistic. And additionally, I can help with connections to community partners. So CCL ideally is the place that if you're feeling like you don't know exactly where to start, come to us first, and we can talk through and develop a plan for helping you to incorporate this into your classes. Okay, I'll stop share. I had to talk very fast because we already were behind on time, because that is the story of, I don't know, 2021. I think that's the story of my life. Any questions? I have about a minute before we're going to start talking about different projects. Any questions, comments, etc.?
Yes, I did have a quick question. is there a maximum number of CISAs that a person should apply for? Because I could just keep so many students going with Model UN. It's crazy. But I keep it at 3, but I didn't know, and I don't want to be piglet, right? Because I want there to be plenty of money to go around, but I didn't know if there was a maximum that was set.
We don't have a maximum set anywhere. My advice would be apply for as many as you would like, and just be prepared that you might not get that many, because right, we want to make sure that we're funding as much as we can. But I will say, like, this year we had leftover CISA money. We had quite a bit, and part of that's because, you know, you all know why we just didn't have as much going on. So I would say apply for as many as you'd like. You know, you might only get 3, but if we have the money, you might also get 5.
Great, thank you, that helped.
Yeah, Sharon, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I applied for a CISA last year. Yeah, and I thought that there was like a roster of students that CCEL had, and would say sort of pair me with one of those. And but I was kind of dismayed to learn that I sort of had to come up with a student myself, and I had difficulties doing that. And then the pandemic happened, so it all kind of fell apart anyway. But can you talk about that? So does a faculty member need to already have a student in mind for this?
It's helpful. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Sharon. It is really helpful if the faculty already have a student in mind for the CISA position, that you already have a relationship with. We can help to some degree. One thing I'm working on, and this is one of my tasks for summer, is to connect a bit more with students who are interested in community engaged work. One thing that I want to put on everyone's radar is there's been some changes to the Honors College. I don't know how familiar any of you are with these changes, but it's really getting revamped with a soft open kind of this fall and a full open with the revamped changes in the spring. And why am I talking about the Honors College right now? Because there's going to be these different tracks now, and one of the tracks is community engagement. And so there are going to be, I think, a few more students with community engagement in general on their radar and thinking about things that they want to do. So we might have a bit more in terms of connection to students that we could partner you with. That's not a full-on promise, but it is something that I want you all to be aware of and kind of keep on your radar, because one of the elements of the Honors College will be doing some sort of experiential work, and that includes internships, and they have included CISAs as a part of that as well. So there hopefully will be a few more students that we might be able to pull from, that we might be able to contact for these projects as well. Yeah. And Brittany, that's a great idea, you know, making an announcement in your classes. A lot of times, if you have pre-existing relationships with students, that also works really well. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. When is the best time to apply for one?
For a CISA? We'll have an RFP go out typically in early August.
Okay.
So you can apply for one for the fall. The way it has been in the past, I think this just changed 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I don't know, time means nothing. At some point, it has changed where it used to be you'd have to apply for a CISA every semester if you wanted one. There's been a bit of a revamp so that if you apply for a CISA in the fall and you just want to renew the CISA in the spring, there'll be a much more streamlined process for you to be able to do that. So that, because if you're already working with them, it's so much easier to just say, yes, I want to keep doing the same thing. Here's a quick update. And we'll continue on with them because I think most projects tend to run the full year. They aren't just semester based. And you can also have a CISA in the summer as well. So one thing that's important to note, the student has to be enrolled in at least 3 credits at the university when they are a CISA. So if they were taking a summer class though, you can apply for a CISA in the summer.
When would you do that? When would you, because summer's coming up like in a week and a half.
We have an RFP that's going to be available by the end of today.
Awesome, good to know.
Yep. So if you're thinking about starting to work on partnerships or a project or something this summer, you can have a CISA. We've got that. Yeah. Any other questions? We'll have more time at the end. I want to make sure we stay on track. I'm only 5 minutes behind, which is like miraculous at this point, right? So I want to touch on some of the sample community engagement projects we've had. And we have both Sarah and Amana here to talk a bit about some projects that they have done. We're going to start with Amana, if you're ready to talk a bit about your really, really cool project.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so how much time do I have, Marsha?
10 minutes.
Okay, all right, that's good. So I wanted to, as I was listening, I was also getting questions. I'm thinking about my own questions about the project. So I will also be, I was thinking, I didn't think about those issues that you have raised. So the project I'm going to talk about is a project that is a partnership between the First Congregational Church and UAA, but specifically the Multicultural Center. And the project is called the Dancing Owls Learning Center. And this is it's an after-school program for 7 to 13-year-olds. And so I'll talk a little bit about how that partnership emerged, because one of the things that I was thinking about is, how did this partnership arise? So I think that's a question that I was really thinking about. And so let me share my screen again. Not a fan of sharing screens, but I think it just helps me to organize my thoughts. So this is the Dancing Owls Learning Center, a partnership between, again, the First Congregational Church and UAA. And as I said, it's really intended to serve children of students, but the students that we're targeting are mostly those students through the AHINA, the Multicultural Center. And so I think around 2019, we had some conversations with the then director of the Multicultural Center, Andre Thon, and we were talking about actually in response to reports about the lower success rates for students of color, minoritized students in terms of their educational success here at UAA. And so we thought, what could be some of the ways that we can help students, particularly those through the MCC Center, to succeed? What is the one thing? And so we had this idea that students really struggle between sort of balancing between school, family, and working full time. And before that, Andre had actually met with Paul Wasco. Paul Wasco, who is a member of the First Congregational Church. And after a while, I joined the church. So, of course, knowing Paul Wasco at that time, I just arrived and he's like, yeah, you can come to my church. So I was like, fine, so I joined First Congregational Church. And as we were talking, these conversations were going on in terms of, how do we support students students from Multicultural Center to succeed. And then slowly we thought about, let's bring in David Moxley, the director of the School of Social Work, and he brought his own ideas. And then we all met at the First Congregational Church and started thinking about, this being a thing, perhaps we could actually do something to address the issue of sort of that students struggle to balance between school and family responsibility as well as full-time work. And I think other conversations that earlier involved the dean, Ben Morton. So I came in when these conversations were happening, and after several meetings between First Congregational Church, the Multicultural Center, and I, of course, representing the School of Social Work, we thought this can actually be turned into a real thing in terms of whether that's going to be an after-school program. That was not really an idea we had initially, but what would it be? What would be the thing that we will create in order to support the students? And so we thought, and I proposed that, first of all, let's establish whether there is a need for such a space. And so we did a survey. We sent out a survey to students to ask them, if we created an after-school program, would you have a need for it? And so we sent out this Qualtrics survey, which was administered through the Multicultural Center. And students, first of all, we asked them whether they had a child, and if they had a child, would they want to use such a space? And overwhelmingly, students were saying, yes, we would definitely want to use that space. So the need was there. And, we had perhaps set the expectations, right? We have this need, we have confirmed that there's a need for such a space. So how do we then go about addressing that need? And so we got back again, conversations and discussions. And really the challenge was then, now we know we have heard from the students, but what about other partners in the community? And so we thought, the first thing would be to do a community-based asset mapping exercise, which will be to bring together partners around kind of the UMed district, but also within Anchorage that work with children and who know something about after school and perhaps have experience serving the kind of students that we're going to be targeting, or at least their children or their siblings. So then we thought about an asset mapping exercise, which was held at the First Congregational Church. But to convene such, we needed support. And so I think at the time, we thought about CCL, but it came much later. And then we reached out to, at the time, it was Donna, the director, and we invited her to our. We told her about this idea, and so we learned about potentially we could apply for a mini grant to support the work, and so I applied for a mini grant, and so that was sort of how we came to learn about the mini grants, and I think it was just perfect timing because at the time they were still open, and so I put in the mini grant, and we also got a CESA to help with organizing the asset exercise, and also send out the invitations, create a list of all the agencies that we need to contact, because obviously FCC, the First Congregational Church, did not have the time nor the resources and somebody to actually do that. So it was very helpful to have CESA to do that. And so that really opened up possibilities for us to even think about doing that. And so we were able to utilize the help of the CESA, but also the funding that we got through the mini grant. to actually organize that asset mapping exercise. So thank you, CCL, for helping us to move that, really sort of to put more flesh to this idea, basically. And so that's how we were able to organize the asset mapping exercise. So the first asset mapping exercise was with partners, sort of agencies. And then, of course, we wanted to bring in another event where we'll bring the parents as well as the kids. But of course, the pandemic, that could not happen. But nevertheless, we really were inspired by what we were able to do to bring in the ideas that we got from the different partners in order to move forward and help us to think about, this space that we're going to create. How would it look like? What would we want to do? And that was very helpful exercise. So these are some shots from the asset mapping exercise. And I would like to say that right here is a cake which was made by one of the kids from the First Congregational Church. So it was nice to get that. And so we did explore, ideas around what would the logo of this Dancing House Learning Center look like, right? So there are people who are putting in ideas and being creative. And it was really to sort of harness the different potentials that community members brought in. Those who thought, I could actually be helping with, artwork. If this center were to start, I'm good at art, so I will be able to bring that to class. Others are good at music. I'll be able to contribute some of my time to do that. And others are good in science and other things. And so we were able to kind of really gauge the levels of interest, but also the different assets that each of those individuals could bring into this space. So that's sort of how it evolved. And so where are we right now? The Dancing Owls Learning Center is actually a real thing now, and it's been incorporated as a 501c nonprofit, and it has its own board. And those board members are, as I have broken down here, and we have a student as well on the board. So again, to make sure that we bring in that student perspective in Dancing Owls. Now, the initial plans were, of course, to open earlier, but given the pandemic, we could not. But now there's real discussions around opening in the fall. As we know, we'll also be opening UAA. So we want to start small. We want to start small by we're thinking perhaps maybe 10 students, and just to kind of test the concept and whether we can actually, how we're going to manage this. So we will be perhaps starting with 10 students, and the students can be either the children of the students who are going to UAA or their siblings, right? And this is something that we learned through the Multicultural Center, that the students are not only looking after their own kids, but their siblings as well. So that space will be there. There's a lot of work that's going to happen between now and the fall to make sure that that space is ready to take in the students. We also created a website. So this is the link to the website. I will not take it through right now, but I can share it through the link, the text box. So this is the Dancing Owls Learning Center, and we are, kind of in the process of getting this operational. I want to respond to a question about challenges of this partnership. One of the key challenges that we actually faced, and this was coming from the students, was the question around faith and spirituality and religion, right? This FCC is a religious institution. And so students were asking, are you only targeting Christians? and so we wanted to make sure that we're able to respond that, in the event that this starts, FCC would only serve as a space but we have no mission of proselytizing or evangelizing or whatever. But we had to make sure that that is clearly responded and that students are aware that FCC, the mission of the Dancing Owls is not to proselytize or to evangelize. So we wanted to make sure that that is the case, and perhaps those questions will be coming up, and we want to feel that we are prepared to respond to those questions as and when they emerge. And then, yeah, I think right now we're thinking about funding and how do we get this off the ground, because it's certainly going to involve some money. So we've formed different groups that are looking at issues of fundraising, but also working on the curriculum. What will the curriculum look like? But also students, as we want this space to also serve students as a practicum site. Perhaps, how do we support students and make sure that sort of there's that seamless connection between their learning and their practice with the Dancing Owls Learning Center. So a lot of ideas around curriculum and how do we make this space a place where students can engage with and learn, but also even for the students whose kids will be attending the school, we're also thinking like, if they want to come and sit there and do their homework, that could be one space where it can be opened up to allow students to work on their schoolwork as we look after their kids or something. So that's the Dancing Owls Learning Center, and I appreciate the support that we got from CCL and the CISA that you gave us, which really made it possible for us to be where we're at. So still ongoing work, but very much excited about it.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so amazing. Yeah, all the hand claps. So next up we have Sarah is going to share a bit. Sarah, if you want to take about 10 minutes to talk, and we're still on track, Brittany, you'll still get your full time. I promise I put in a little bit of wiggle room for all of these. So we're good on time. Okay, thanks so much, Amana. Again, it's such a cool project. Sarah, you're up.
Cool, well, I can keep this short and simple and maybe get us back on time too, because I know folks have things that they need to do. I see Amber needs to run. So it's nice to meet everybody. I know almost everybody here. Sarah Buckingham, faculty in the Department of Psychology. I'm a clinical community psychologist, and I have been very thankful to be funded from CCEL for a number of projects. All of the work that I do is community engaged, with the community front and center and the priorities of the research or any programming that we do. So I thought I would highlight just a couple of projects that myself and my team have been up to, and then answer any questions that folks have. So my work is largely with immigrant and refugee populations. I look at how communities shape how people change and maintain their cultures over time, and what that looks like for integration and inclusion in our communities, as well as what that means for mental health and well-being, looking at how do we also create mental health services that are culturally congruent and responsive to all of our community members. And so my work tends to involve community partners in lots of different spaces. One of the first projects that I was lucky to have CCEL fund through a number of CISAs for a couple of years is a partnership with RAISE. So that's our Refugee Assistance and Immigration Services. It is the sole resettlement center for the state of Alaska. And that collaboration came up because my clinical work is largely centered in serving forced migrant populations, so both refugees and asylum seekers. And when I had first relocated to the state of Alaska, I had a lot of conversations with folks around and learned that a lot of our mental health care providers did not feel competent to serve refugee populations. And CCEL had even supported a needs assessment with a number of community entities a couple years before I arrived around what the needs of refugees in our communities were. And one of the biggest things came up was, of course, culturally congruent mental health services. And so I started to partner with Refugee Assistance and Immigration Services to figure out how can we help bring providers in the fold, have people feel competent and confident to serve our refugee population, knowing that that is a broad array of people with lots of different cultures and lots of different presenting problems. And so together, we truly collaborated and brought a lot of students into the fold as well to develop curriculum and programming that we then offered to therapists throughout the state of Alaska free of charge, and offered continuing education credits for them to come receive that knowledge and training from us, so they had an incentive to participate. And then we, of course, measured how their changes in competence and confidence took place over time. And then we also brought them into a provider network so that folks were offering up some of their time pro bono in serving our refugee and asylum seeking communities, who oftentimes are not able to receive mental health services because they don't have access to insurance, or they only have access to Medicaid. And that's a whole nother story about what Medicaid reimburses and who it reimburses. And that project has continued on for years and years, and actually built on itself by making interpretation available and lots of different things through following the needs of a community partner. So that's one example of a community engaged project. Another that we're currently doing that Amana is actually working on as well is a project with the municipality of Anchorage, and we're looking at immigrant integration and inclusion within our city. And this was a project that came to us. So folks with Welcoming Anchorage in the community reached out saying they wanted to do this work. They knew about our work in this space and wanted to bring folks to the table. And so we were able to provide the research infrastructure and the know-how about how you go about designing a study that is really rigorous, while they were able to bring in all of the community partners to make sure that we're doing a study that actually leads to important information for the municipality, so the municipality can make the changes that are needed. But I think that's where community engaged research is such a beautiful thing, because oftentimes we at the university, we have the kind of the research know-how, but we have to be doing research that's actually valuable to our communities. And so we do that through partnership, and they bring the know-how of what is useful and in what fashion, and together that's how we make things work. So that's a really cool project. Some of you have heard a little bit about it in the past, but it's a mixed methods project that's in 7 or 8 different languages and involves both focus groups and surveys, and we're in the middle of data analysis right now. So lots of fun, and I'll stop there, but would welcome any questions that folks have. Love talking about this work.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That all of those, both of those projects sound amazing. And that's so you segued so beautifully into what we're going to talk about next. Excellent. Did anyone have any questions for either Amana or Sarah? We have a couple minutes in our schedule. All right. Well, see, the segue was just too perfect to move into talking about research. I'm going to hand it over to Brittany now to talk about research and this like amazing fellows program that has been so prolific.
Oh, that's quite an introduction to live up to. Okay, my name is Brittany Howell, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about a project that we just started for the first time last year, and we will be continuing into the next year, called the CE Research Fellows Program, which stands for Community Engaged. And so this is a faculty fellows program that focuses on research. So we're not so much necessarily into sort of the service learning in the classroom or in the teaching, although there can be integration. Instead, this focus is on a community of practice and a mentorship network for people who are interested in fostering the research component of their community engaged work. Again, this can sometimes be in the classroom or incorporated in the classroom, but This last year has been a really exciting, groundbreaking time for us to try out this program, which exists in other institutions. It's just new here for us. And so I led this project this year with Dr. Hattie Harvey, who couldn't make it with us today. And again, this is essentially a community of practice. So it is a group of faculty that get together, and Hattie and I are in no way the experts. We're more the facilitators of a way to get a bunch of faculty together who all have different experience, and we all draw on that. So it's a place for us to exchange ideas and knowledge about partnership development, which we've been talking about today, but there might be some specific differences between developing a partnership for your classroom or for your students versus for a research program, right? We also talk a lot about research methodologies and ways that we might logistically engage in these sorts of research projects in the community, as well as the dissemination of that research. So once we do this great research, there's sometimes a now what? And there can be a gray literature or a white paper that comes out, but we can also help find journal articles and other places for people to be publishing this work for the broader audience. Right. So this program, as was held last year for the first time, began with the May Intensive. So this session that we're at right here was actually the first session last year for our faculty fellows. We're doing things a little bit different in the next year from some feedback we received. And then we also had monthly brown bags. Or monthly meetings that included brown bags, but also a couple of other things. So we had 4 brown bag faculty presentations that I'll talk about in a moment, 3 design clinics. I'll also describe what that means. And then the faculty fellows also engaged with the Urban and Rural in Alaska Conference, as well as the Community Engagement Forum. So last year's brown bag sessions were incredible. They were led by our faculty fellows, right? So again, it's not necessarily that, me and Hattie were like teaching things. We were just facilitating a community of practice. So our faculty fellows taught each other from these brown bags. For example, the first one was on strategies and considerations for incorporating research in the classroom. That was co-facilitated by myself and Yvonne Chase in Human Services. We had the ins and outs of the IRB, because not everybody in the Faculty Fellows program had done community engaged research before. So what does the IRB look like, and what are the ways in which we engage with that for our work, was presented by Dan Allen and Robert Bachman. We also had an introduction to qualitative methods for community engaged research that was facilitated by Sarah Buckingham, and then public humanities and community engagement, which was with Ian Hartman and the Anchorage Museum. So those were the brown bags we did last year, but we also did this thing called a design clinic. And a design clinic is a place for us to get together and help each other work through research problems, questions, or issues. So it's a time for these colleagues to help sort each other's issues out. And there is a specific format. So it's kind of a rigorous little format to make sure we don't go off into too many different tangents. But it does create a space to ensure that we're understanding what the real challenge is with this research problem. It prevents each other from giving advice too quickly by following this format. We have to think through it in a specific way that I'll show you in a second. It prevents one voice from steering the whole thing, right? This is not something that is being taught, but a time for us to all work together, and lets the presenter focus on listening. So the person with the question gets to do quite a bit of listening in this process. So there's a couple of different roles to facilitate it. There's a presenter. This is the person who brings the design clinic or the research question or problem. There's a moderator who helps walk us through these stages, and that's often me, just because I am very willing to tell people that time is up. Ensures everybody that stays on track, but then there's also a timekeeper that can help make sure that is moving forward. There's often a note taker to help make sure that everything is being recorded, and generally our faculty fellows is a great size for these groups. You want to keep it between 8 and 12 people. This is also something you can do with your students or in your community engaged work. So here's what it looks like. It's about 22 minutes in length. That sounds very specific. There's always a little bit of movement in those time spaces. But the first one begins with the presenter, the person who has the research problem, coming into the room and saying, can you help me with blank? Okay, this is a time where that person relates the challenge that they're having with their research and the ongoing or upcoming work that they're having a problem with, and gives a brief context or frame. This is only 2 minutes. So my problem is blank, right? The next space is where the people in the room, the group, can ask questions. Those questions usually start out with something like, could you tell me more about? And this is where they're inquiring about maybe a little bit more specifics or circumstances around this problem. In this phase, group members are not giving advice. They are literally just asking the person more questions about their research problem. Okay, 6 minutes sounds short. It is. The third phase, this makes me think of, so now the group members are sharing other experiences that they've had with a similar problem. Okay, oh man, you're having a problem with this research question. That makes me think of a time where I had a similar issue, or I heard of someone else having a similar issue, right? Very brief connection to, this is not just your problem. This is something that lots of people go through. And here are some things that make those connections. The fourth phase is where we finally start to give each other advice. The reason is because we've started thinking through what that advice might be already in the first few stages. By thinking of similar experiences, we're able to start conjuring up advice now rather than too early in the process. So in stage 4 is where we get to say things like, you might try, and this is where the group members are providing suggestions and the presenter or the person with the research problem is just listening. This is, again, 6 minutes doesn't sound like a lot depending on how many people are contributing. And then the last phase is where the presenter, the person with the research problem, sort of restates what they're hearing as advice from the rest of the group. What struck me was the presenter shares briefly about some of the notable things that they'd heard from the advice and from the experiences of the group. So that sounds incredibly structured, and it is, but it works really well to make sure that we're all formulating our thoughts pretty well before we speak them, and that is done in a succinct way. So here's some examples of questions that have come to our last year's design clinic. How can I best move my work in dialogues and deliberation to my research agenda? So this is a specific phrase that refers to some work this individual was doing in her classroom. And so she's thinking, you know, this is a thing that I do really well with my students, but is there a way I can work it into my research? Another question that came before the group, my grant application was not funded. How do you suggest I revise the focus of this project? Right, so she gave us the research questions and her hypotheses and some of the feedback that she received from the grant reviews. And then we were able to try to help her work through a way to revise that grant application in only 22 minutes. The last one, I'm interested in this and this. How can I craft this together into a single overarching research question, right? That's also a very common problem that folks had, or an issue that folks had. I have too many interests, or I'm not quite sure how these things fit together. Having other faculty help you work through that has been really helpful for these design clinics. So I realize I am just blasting through this, but let's take a couple of minutes to maybe think about what that might be. If you were in this cohort, if you were in the Faculty Fellows group, what kind of design clinic question or research problem might you bring to a group like this? Okay, so here's some things to think about. We want to focus this on community engaged research. So most of us are here because we're either there or thinking about getting there. So an effective design clinic builds upon a thoughtful request for help. So what sort of thoughtful requests for help might you have? These requests focus on some aspect of your work that you're maybe rethinking, or something that you're open to redesigning. Okay, the worst thing to do is to come to a design clinic when you've already got your ideas, you already know what you're going to do, or you've already written the grant app. This needs to be something you're pretty willing to open up and to have revised, right? In order to make it maybe more effective or consistent, or inclusive. Okay, so that's another component that's really great. I've been doing this in this way, but I'm not sure I'm including all of the students who need access to it, or all the community members who could have access to this. How do I make this idea more inclusive, for example? So there are some general guidelines that we follow when coming up with an effective design clinic question. These are a couple of bullet points just to think about. We want to make sure it's singular, right? In survey research, we would call that like a double-barreled question if it's got way too many things packed into it. So this is one request. It is not many, many things jammed together. It's pretty simple, right? How do I fix this? Here's the problem. What do I do about it? Group members should be easily able in 22 minutes to understand the problem, to come up with some examples, and to come up with advice. We want it to be practical. How can this relate to an ongoing active challenge in your practice or your work? Actionable. It should relate to something that in which you are able to change, right? Nothing worse than accidentally bringing a question where all of the advice are things that are outside of your control. Okay? It happens, and it's not your fault if that happens, but we want to try to make sure that this is something that you're able to move forward on. Inviting. It should encourage people to become curious and invested in your research question. One thing that happened in our first Faculty Fellows cohort is a lot of collaboration. There were several of us that ended up co-authoring or working on projects together as a result of these networks and connections that we made in this group. Also, energy. So it should reveal your enthusiasm about moving forward with these solutions, right? Okay, so that's a lot. I want to take a couple minutes of silence where I will be quiet, where you can maybe look at some of these bullet points and think honestly, you know, if this were our community of practice, if these people in this room were about to listen to your research question, what might that be? If you had this group of people to help you, what question would you pose about your community engaged research? So let's just take a couple minutes to maybe write down some thoughts or ideas on that. Okay, so it's been a couple of minutes, maybe not quite enough time to really think about our community engaged research and those intractable problems that we might be engaging in. But does anybody want to share what sort of question you've come up with, or a general idea about the sort of thing you might bring to a design clinic if this were a real one?
Well, if I may ask a quick one, what about the political correctness of the plan? You know, how might students interpret what I'm doing? In other words, is it dangerous for the faculty's career? You know, how the research might be set up.
Okay, so maybe a question about the ethics of that particular project.
That's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say ethics, because an awful lot of things that I think we ought to do we can't do because your career would be cut pretty short if you did it. So I'm thinking more, with the impact. For example, there were a couple of adjuncts, I think it was at Georgetown University, that were talking with one another when the class was over. Are you familiar with this situation? I'm not sitting in my chair because I've got a pile of books in it, so I'm standing to the side. But they were talking, and it was still being recorded as a class at the end of the class. And they were talking about their concern with some of their students in the class not doing very well, and that there was a racial association with that. And I believe both of those adjuncts were fired when students pointed out that they had discussed that. And it seemed to me that it was a very legitimate concern that the two teachers might share with one another about the students that they were experiencing those kinds of problems with. Could have been their bias, but nonetheless, they were being honest with one another. But they were both fired because of that. So what I'm talking about is political correctness as it's perceived by the community. The way you set up your research, how is the community going to perceive that, and will it endanger your career, really? Of course. So it's not an ethical issue unless you think of it. Kimberly might think of the larger ramifications of that political correctness and its ethical implications. But I mean, there's lots of times where even in class, of course, I'll refrain from saying something because of the implications that it or the way people might interpret it. Instead of thinking, gee, I'm just being open to possibilities, right?
I'm gonna jump in and say, I think maybe what you're getting at, William, is this topic or question that I'm presenting in this case, inclusive? Like, is it worded in a way that's inclusive and going to be well received? Maybe that would, Brittany, is that the kind of question you might bring to a design clinic like this, is like around inclusivity? Is that something you might talk about?
If it were focused on the research. So generally, the sorts of things that we might experience in the classroom or with student learning outcomes are not necessarily part of the community engaged research fellows program. So again, some of this can happen in the classroom, but for the most part, this has to do with us building our research agendas. So it might be a question about ensuring that the project is including as many community partners or the group that our target population as possible. And so essentially in our last cohort, we produced an incredible variety of products. Now, it's not entirely because of the fellows program. These are very productive people anyway, but our cohort included a lot of individuals who produced a lot of things during the time in which we were all together. So we've got a number of different research projects and sometimes even service learning in the classroom that turned into a research project that ended up getting published in a variety of different ways. So this is the list of things that our cohort of 8 produced over the last year. And a number of them have also been in really large places. So towards the bottom here, you might be able to see that we had some articles from our population, or from our fellows in Newsweek and in some really popular media. So we're pretty proud of the things that people were able to do. And I wanted to put in a plug, of course, for our next cohort, which is currently accepting applications. So for the next cohort, we're going to make a couple of tweaks, but the general format will be similar. I will be continuing to help facilitate, but I will be doing so with Dr. Sarah Buckingham, who was one of our faculty fellows last year, who is bringing her experience to help improve and facilitate the project this year with me. We'll be doing something very similar, monthly sessions that will incorporate a variety of brown bags that are led by our other faculty fellows in ways that are helpful to everybody in the group and rely on our own expertise, things that we can share with each other. We'll be doing these design clinics again, and one-on-one consultation with faculty co-leads. So we did this a little bit last year. We didn't have a lot of people who were jumping at the bit to really work one-on-one in sort of more of a mentorship program, but we're going to focus a little bit more on that this year probably. So what are the ways in which we can work with people specifically on continuing to make sure that they're making it through their research goals? Just like last time, we'll also be engaging in the Urban and Rural Alaska Conference, as well as the Community Engaged Forum. And I will post this in the chat right now, but if you are interested, please apply. We have an early bird deadline of May 14th coming up. And depending on how many applications we receive, we may reopen it again in August. And then that allows us for maybe some newer faculty to help join the group. So that is all I really wanted to say about the Faculty Fellows Program from last year and our plans for next year. Does anybody have any questions?
Brittany, is there more information on like the ideal candidate for something like that?
No.
Like, do you need to have a project ready to go, or?
In the application link that I'd sent, we ask a question if you have a research project ready to go. And to be honest, it depends on the applicants we receive. So if we've got a wide variety of people that we would like to have in our cohort, that will not be a factor. If for some reason we have, hundreds of people applying, then we might use some of those criterion to make sure that we're really setting everyone up for success. But at least last year, and probably here, because this is still a pretty new project, I don't anticipate you would need to have a project ready to go in order to be accepted.
Interesting. Thank you.
I just wanted to say I'm impressed by the amount of work that was done and published in this crazy time of this last year, and congratulations to everyone who was involved in its inaugural year, and I see nothing but success coming up, so congratulations.
Thank you. It's going to be hard to beat, right? Next year's cohort, we really need to crush it.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I know that you're supposed to count to 7 after asking, do you have any questions? And like, that seems like agony to just sit in silence, but thank you, Brittany. I mean, I said they were prolific. I feel like that was an accurate representation of what occurred with the Research Fellows last year, and looking forward to next year. So we are at kind of break time now. We are ahead of schedule. Crushed it. So if you want to hang out in here and you have questions, if you want to bounce some ideas off of anyone, I'm going to stop the recording and hang out in here for the next about 30 minutes until noon. If everyone leaves, I will also leave. And if you are ready to go, or you've got other things to go, whatever's going on, I know that we're busy right now. We'll be reconvening at 1 o'clock. You can use the same link that you used to get into this, and we'll have both of our guest speakers this afternoon, and then there'll be a final hour where we'll have some breakout rooms and you can talk a little bit more in small groups with some of those guest speakers. So I'm going to hang out in here. You are free to go. If you need to go walk or use the restroom or eat a snack or probably go to a meeting or write an email, I don't know. I have all of those things to do at some point today too. Otherwise, you're free to go, but I'll hang out in here. So I will hopefully see all of you at 1 o'clock this afternoon.